Welcome to the Volpe Report podcast, the state's premier public affairs show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians. I'm your host, Chuck Volpe. Join us now as we speak to this week's guest.
The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Speaker, welcome to the Volpe Report, and thank you on behalf of the people in Northeast and Central Pennsylvania for making time in what we all know is a very busy schedule. Second most powerful man in government, as you got to show the country when you dealt directly with the president in the debt ceiling negotiations. But thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, and it's an honor to be with you. I've been a big admirer of the report, but I've been to this area quite often. Dan Musier has me up a few times, and I really, to all your viewers and listeners, I thank them for the work they do. To me, I'm very impressed of what happens in Pennsylvania.
Well, thank you. And I know I can attest, having met you personally on some of those visits. You've had quite a year, Speaker, for the last half of 2022, trying to get a majority. You traveled the country. Those were some of the visits I met you on. Yes. And that was, you were in Pennsylvania one day and you were in Montana the next and then Texas. And when you finally took your track shoes off and you win a contested vote for speakership, which you prevailed on, as everybody expected, and then you walk right into what's going on in our country. And we're going to talk about some of that. The fact that you now, as Republicans, have the majority, the things Americans are finding out in your subcommittees and committees with subpoena power, calling in members of the Biden cabinet, has been revelatory. I don't even know where to start on Secretary Mayorkas and his performance. I was amazed and dumbfounded with Secretary Deborah Haaland's performance, who apparently didn't know much about what the Department of the Interior does and the energy fallout in the country that we're facing. So you've had a lot. So kind of overview the 6 months you've had as Speaker.
Well, as many of you know, most people who run for Speaker get elected on the first round. I happen to be Irish, so I like to go 15 rounds. So it turned out well. But I hope everybody realized from that point is I will never give up on them. And one thing that I would walk and listen to a lot of people in Pennsylvania, especially when we rolled out the Commitment to America, we actually did it in Pennsylvania. And in there, we made a lot of commitments having listened to what we would achieve. And it gave us a roadmap to do exactly what we said we would start doing. I mean, think for one moment. We wanted to make sure the pandemic was over. The president said he wouldn't sign that bill. We got that bill signed. We've now got the information about where this virus actually started. Look at what we're finding today, and it's only with our investigations becoming the majority that we find, funding from America actually provided some of this inside China, and it started in the Wuhan lab, which the government wouldn't tell us. We first started out making sure, trying to pull back those 87,000 IRS agents. We stopped them from hiring anybody, the $1.4 billion they're going to use this year to hire anybody, and the $20 billion going into the future. And we got to keep fighting to make that happen. We want to become energy independent, which is very important for Pennsylvania, but to America and to not just our energy, but our clean air. To be able to cut the red tape so we can build things again, not just roads, but pipelines and others, to get that NEPA reform that hasn't happened in 40 years. But we passed H.R. 1, our energy independence bill. We looked at parents who want to say in their kids' education, a parent's bill of rights. We were able to pass that as well. We've looked at making sure our streets are safe. We stopped D.C. from decriminalizing these criminal-friendly bills that are going through. The Democrats voted against it. The president said he'd veto it. And lo and behold, the American people spoke and he signed it. We're watching just be able to stop this wasteful Washington spending. We can't stop it all, but we've made a real dent to begin with to spend less than we spent last year, to get work requirements in, for those who are able-bodied with no dependents, be able to put in those 20 hours for welfare and get that welfare reform working to help these people get jobs again. I mean, I think we're off to a really strong start with a lot of people didn't give us credit to do it.
Regrettably, we have run out of time. We blew through this half hour. Again, I want to thank you for making time with all you have to deal with. It's like getting the President of the United States on the show. Your schedule is similar to his, actually. So thank you again, and I hope we can do this at some point in the future. In a Republican majority in Congress and in the White House.
Look, I would love that, but I love going out to Pennsylvania, seeing the American public, how hard you're working. To all your viewers and all your listeners, thank you for what you're doing. But also remember what Abraham Lincoln would tell us: believe in the exceptionalism of this country. There's no other countries conceived in liberty and dedicated the proposition that we're all equal. And we can continue to strive to make the next century ours. And the Pennsylvania people have a lot to do with making that happen. It doesn't matter what party you're in, we're all Americans, and we can all join together and make for the common good that the next century is the American century.
Nothing to add to that, Mr. Speaker. Thank you again so much for your time. Robert, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Thank you for having me, Chuck.
This is the 60th anniversary on Sunday, March 17th, 2024, of, I'm going to say, in the entire history of the Friendly Sons of St. Patrick. They have an annual dinner on St. Patrick's Day. It's over 100 years old, the event. And in 1964, your father came up as a special guest to be the main speaker and spoke to that Friendly Sons dinner. This Sunday marks the 60th anniversary, and I am grateful to you for how busy you are as a presidential candidate, that you would take out a few minutes to reminisce about that visit from your father that still, Robert, lives in legend, in myth, and in memory of all of Northeast and Central Pennsylvania. So let me at least say that I think you would have been around 9 or 10 at the time of that visit, so I'm pretty sure you may remember it or your father talking about it. So can you share any memories that you may have from your father's visit, St. Patrick's Day, 1964?
Yeah, and I remember when he went there because it was it was an important speech to him because it was the first speech he made after his brother's death, the first public appearance that he made, and he had been shattered by that death and had completely withdrawn. He never visited the Justice Department anymore, although he had continued to be Attorney General for several months after. It was a time in his life when he was reorienting himself and trying to figure out what he was going to do with his life. And he went to the Friendly Sons, and there was a stanza of a poem that he read there, a very, very beautiful poem. And he had to practice it because it was very emotional. It was related to Jack's death. And he and his aides were nervous that he couldn't get through reading that stanza without breaking into tears. And
close to 2,000 black-tied Irishmen broke into tears after he got done that night.
And he went to that speech, and the response that he got, not only from inside the hall, but outside the hall in Scranton, was so extraordinary that it buoyed him. He had a buoyancy after that night. He saw the love that people had for his brother, and that love was now being attached to him. And for the first time, he began thinking that maybe he himself had a public life. Before that, Chuck, my father had never been a public person. He was shy. He was very tough, but he was not good at public speaking. He just was not, and he wasn't a glad hander. He wasn't a retail politician. He was just too shy for that, but he was a very good manager and administrator. And he saw his role in life as advancing his brother's ambitions and his brother's aspirations for our country. but everything that he did was focused on being effective through his brother. So he was kind of the Turk in the campaign. He ran the presidential campaign in 1960. Before that, he had run my uncle's investigation of the mafia at the Rackets Committee, and he was probably the best investigator of his era. And he was a really good administrator, but he was not a public person, and he never saw himself as a public person. And I think that night changed his perception of his life, because he realized he no longer had his brother between him and the public, that he himself had a public life in front of him, and that and it gave him confidence in a career. And then he did a couple of other things after that. He did a trip that President Johnson sent him to Indonesia, and he got the same kind of response there. He got 1 million people coming out of the street greeting him. He took us to Poland, to a communist country, and 2 million people came to Krakow Square to see him. And I think, beginning with the Friendly Sons Dinner, he started realizing that he had a public life in front of him. And then in 1964, he ran for United States Senate in New York. And I campaigned all over the state with him. And then, of course, 4 years later, in 1968, he ran for president.
We have for you today a very special Volpe report. This past Wednesday, former President Donald J. Trump came to Scranton for a rally that was held at the Riverfront Sports Complex. This was my first Trump rally, and it was the wild and raucous event that I had seen and heard about through television coverage and news stories. I was fortunate through mutual associations to have an opportunity to meet with President Trump privately prior to his taking the stage. I had been told that he is a different person in private than he is according to his public persona. I can now attest that that is true. He was warm and personable and engaging, and while we talked some politics, he also talked with my wife Ellen and informed me of what I already knew, that I'm a lucky guy. We will be joined today by his national co-chairwoman of his transition team, former Congresswoman and former presidential candidate, Democratic presidential candidate, Tulsi Gabbard. And now you sit here, like Bobby Kennedy, like Chuck Volpe, having left the Democratic Party. So that backdrop, how did all that happen, and how did you decide to make the move you made, and why do you sit here today in the position you do?
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. And I'm grateful to join you and all of your viewers here today, really during such a critical time. When I was 21 years old, I ran for State House in Hawaii. And at that point in time, I had to make a decision about what party to join. I didn't come from a family that had a strong political legacy. My parents homeschooled all 5 of us kids, and they taught us to think for ourselves, to be critical thinkers. And I was a very independent-minded person. And so at that time, I looked at both parties. This was over 20 years ago, and I was drawn to the Democrat Party because at that time, it still represented the party of John F. Kennedy. It still was a big open tent party that welcomed people with different views and different backgrounds, different religions, different ideas. They stood up for free speech, even the free speech rights of those who said things that they found to be offensive and abhorrent. They stood up for civil rights. They stood up for civil liberties. They stood up and fought for the little guy, the everyday working man and woman in this country. That's the legacy of the Democrat Party in Hawaii, was fighting for the plantation workers against the corporate elitist Republican leaders at that time. And fast forward to where we are today. Obviously, you've talked about some of the things that I've done in politics since. But the Democrat Party of today is wholly unrecognizable from the party that I joined, which is why I left the Democrat Party a few years ago. I wrote a book in detail about my experiences and what drove me to make that decision. The book is called For Love of Country, and that really captures who I am, what's in my heart, and what drives my decisions. I've always been an independent-minded person, even as a Democrat for almost 20 years. But my decisions are centered around what's in the best interest of the American people and our country, period. I still serve in the U.S. Army Reserve today. I'm a lieutenant colonel and a battalion commander. I'm grateful to be able to have the opportunity to serve my country in different ways. which is why I made the decision to endorse President Trump in this election. There are a lot of different issues that are at stake here, and we'll have some time to talk through, I think, some of the biggest ones. But I think my experience, your experience, the experience of Bobby Kennedy reflects perhaps a lot of the experiences that people in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and in different parts of Pennsylvania have gone through or are going through themselves, of having been a part of the Democrat Party for a long time, but really looking at what today's Democrat Party leadership stands for. And it goes directly against the Constitution. It goes directly against our fundamental God-given rights and freedoms enshrined in the Constitution. Things like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, our right to defend ourselves and our loved ones, our Second Amendment rights, our Fourth Amendment rights to our civil liberties, our privacy, our protection against illegal and warrantless search and seizure by our government. It is no longer, the Democrat Party is no longer a party of peace.
As Bobby Kennedy has said, the party that's a threat to democracy is the one that's trying to censor us, the Democrats.
Yes.
The one trying to take away our freedoms, the Democrats. The ones that have weaponized the Justice Department through lawfare and are putting Republicans like Donald Trump are trying to put them in jail. But ending with now, I know you only have a minute left. You kind of said it beautifully and eloquently to Chris Matthews sitting next to you. Why is that not the case? That in fact, the Democrats are much more the threat to democracy than Donald Trump?
When we look at the pillars of our democracy, it's rooted in our fundamental rights and freedoms, this open, thriving marketplace of ideas, and the rule of law. When we look at what's gone on over these past 4 years under a Democrat presidency, specifically under Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, we have seen them undermining our democracy. They tried to remove Donald Trump's name from the ballot in over 32 states because they didn't even want voters to have the option to choose. Thank God there was a unanimous vote in the Supreme Court that specifically said that. Voters are the ones who get to choose who they want to be president. There's not some government entity that gets to predetermine whose names are allowed to be on the ballot. They continue to try to silence and censor our free speech. Hillary Clinton and John Kerry both just in the last week said that the First Amendment is an obstacle to their being able to gain total control. They're not even hiding what their goals and objectives are. If we value freedom, if we value our right as voters to be able to decide who we want to govern and lead us as our founders envisioned for us, if we want to ensure that we have our First Amendment rights, our Second Amendment rights, those God-given rights enshrined in our Constitution, there is only one choice in this election to vote for, which is why I've endorsed President Trump. He is our best hope to protect our democracy, to protect our right to free speech, to protect our Second Amendment rights, and to put us back on this path towards a future where we can live in a safe and secure community and work towards a peaceful and prosperous future. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for Dick Cheney and a vote for exactly the opposite. It is a vote for more war. It is a vote for our freedoms being taken away and more of the same kind of economic hardship that we've seen over these past 4 years. We want change. We need change. President Trump is the change candidate in this election.
Thank you so much, Tulsi, for your time. You've been eloquent as usual. And I sleep better at night knowing there are people like you using your national platform to educate the American people. I try in this media market to do the same. But thank you for your service to our country again, and Godspeed on your continued journey.
Thank you so much, Chuck. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Eric, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Thanks so much, Chuck.
It's a real pleasure to have you. It's great that you take time. When I have a national guest, I like to tell them that, you're talking about 3.5 or 4 million people, Northeast and Central Pennsylvania, on this Fox affiliate. And it's great to have people of your stature and that deal with national issues talking directly to the people of Northeastern Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
I know it's going to be important for your father to do well here, and he has done well in this whole area.
Yeah.
So having said that, the first question I'd like to ask you, Eric, is you and your family and your father obviously have been through a great ordeal. And it's so disingenuous to me when I hear the Democrats talk about your father as a threat to democracy and all that kind of stuff. We heard from Kamala Harris also recently. when she was interviewed by Brett Baer at Fox. But having said all that, how is your family able to deal with the trials and all of these scurrilous accusations? There's been 2 now assassination attempts. It's rather amazing to me that the resilience not only of your father, the former president, but of you and Don Jr. and your family generally dealing with that. So,
listen, Chuck, I'm not sure if we have a choice. And you're right. I mean, from the second he came down that escalator, they've gone after him viciously, right? I mean, the dirty dossier, the Russia hoax, they tried to impeach him twice. They went after his Supreme Court justices mercilessly. I have 111 subpoenas that have been filed against me. I've never gotten a traffic ticket, right? And they came after me for doing absolutely nothing wrong, right? And they raided his house. They raided Melania's closet. They went after Barron. They pulled him off the ballot in Colorado. Then they tried to pull him off the ballot in Maine. It had to go to the Supreme Court. Then they weaponized every AG and every DA in the country, right? And I mean, game after game, nonsense after nonsense. And, and then literally he was obviously shot at and hit in Butler. And somebody tried to kill him in Florida. And then you see the recent one in California where, thankfully they foiled that, ahead of time. And he's got state actors that are after him. I guess the answer to your question is you just got to be tough, right? I mean, you just have to be tough. I don't think we ever would have realized that politics was as evil as it truly is, as dangerous as it is. They've literally and figuratively shot at him every single day since he came down that escalator. And my father's there. He's the last person that needs his job, but he wants to save this country. He wants to save this republic. I mean, our country is in steep decline right now. Everybody knows it. Everybody feels it. You can't go to the grocery store without paying 3 times as much as when my father was in office. I mean, look at mortgage rates, and good luck trying to refinance a home right now with 8% mortgage rates versus 2.5% under my father. The cost of fuel, by the way, which is egregious in Northeast Pennsylvania, where you've got, and just in Pennsylvania in general, where you've got more fuel than pretty much any state in the world. I mean, it makes Saudi Arabia envious how much natural gas we have in this state, and yet we have fuel costs that are astronomical. It doesn't make any sense, right? Auto insurance, home insurance, utility bills. I mean, everything is unaffordable in this country, and people haven't gotten a raise in a 4-year period of time. And so, listen, as a family, we go out there and fight because we love this nation and we want to restore red, white, and blue. And our country has serious problems, and that's going to change. Help is on the way, but that's going to change.
Well, I hate to overstate it and be overdramatic, but other people have said that, to me, there is clearly an existential threat. And it's not from your father or your family or the Republican Party. It's from the National Democratic Party. They also try to kick him off ballots. They have used censorship. They have used coercion. I had the pleasure of interviewing Tulsi Gabbard last week. I said to her point blank, I said, you would seem to check every Democratic woke box. I mean, a woman of color, Democratic leadership, vice chair of the DNC, Democratic candidate for president. And they gave her effectively ultimatums that you either toe exactly the line or we'll cast you out. We'll primary you. And she did the one better. She said, the hell with you, I'm leaving. And she left the Democratic Party. So to me, the disingenuousness of the Democratic argument that somehow your father's a threat to democracy, it flies in the face of it's almost like they're hiding this lie in plain sight. Yeah. It's everywhere.
Well, it's a threat to democracy. I mean, he created the greatest economy this country's ever seen. There were no wars, peace in the Middle East. The Abraham Accords, the greatest ally, the greatest relationship ever with Israel, right? I mean, look at the relationship he formed with countries that, we were probably going to go to war with, including North Korea and others. Everybody respected the United States. But I mean, getting back to your first point, it's under my father, the Democratic Party has left guys like you and frankly, even like us a long time ago. I mean, if you think about men my height swimming in women's sports, I would say that Pennsylvania Democrats aren't exactly into these things. When you look at Kamala Harris's interview last night, which is, Kamala, will you continue to pay for, transgender sex surgeries for illegal, incarcerated immigrants?
Using tax dollars.
Using American tax dollars. Right. I will follow the law, Brett. I will follow the law. No. Will you pay for sex surgeries for illegal incarcerated inmates? Yes, sir, I will follow the law. No, the answer is no. The answer is that is our smallest priority when it's not even a priority, but when you have an educational system in this country that's ranked 30th in the world, we should be number 1 with education. When everything else is under attack, when people can't afford to go to Disney World anymore, when people can't afford to live their lives, when they can't afford groceries, when they can't afford their utilities. Chuck, you've got 25% of people in this country who are late on their electrical bill. I mean, think about that. You've got the highest credit card debt ever. America has become totally unaffordable. And And then you have Kamala Harris, going out there talking about how, again, sex change surgeries for illegal immigrants should be paid for by taxpayers. These people aren't serious. They're not serious individuals. And I think that's why my father has the momentum that he does right now. I think that's why he's doing as well in the betting odds as he is. And people want to just common sense restored back to this nation. They just want common sense to prevail. And there is no common sense on the other side. We're not winning at anything we do.
It reminds me, I'm older than you, so I remember growing up the Brady Bunch, and they had a wonderful episode where Jan, the middle overlooked sister, was always compared to her beautiful older sister, Marcia. And there was that famous line, she finally blew and had enough, and she said, Marcia, Marcia, Marcia. Well, I think you guys should do a commercial that has Kamala Harris saying Trump, 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 sure. and put that up next to it so they make the connection.
Well, you saw
it's
that
ridiculous.
You saw that in this interview. They asked her, Kamala, why did you lie about Joe Biden's cognitive state? You lied every day for a 4-year period of time. Why did you lie? I mean, weren't you disingenuous? Everybody sees his faculties. His faculties aren't there. God bless. Well, I'll probably be there at some point as well. But you lied to the American people. You said he was incredibly sharp and he was very with it. And everybody saw that he wasn't. Why did you lie? Well, Donald Trump is a bad... Stop. I mean, this is literally their go-to. And you brought up Iran before. I mean, let's not forget that Barack Obama gave Iran $150 billion, including $1.8 billion in cash that they flew over in planes to Tehran, right? And now they're using all that money to launch missiles at our greatest ally in the region, Israel. That the whole region has completely become destabilized, whereas Iran under my father was bankrupt. I mean, he went around to every country in the world and said, listen, you buy oil and gas off of Iran, you don't get to do any business whatsoever with the United States. You kind of pick your trading partner. And guess what? Our economy is about 100 times the size of Iran, so everybody decided to be partners with America versus Iran. And guess what? They were broke. They didn't have the money to shoot missiles. They didn't have the money to attack our allies. And now their nuclear program is in full speed. They're creating absolute terror all across the region. They have threats on my life and my brother's life and my father's life, clearly. I mean, they're obviously they don't want to see him become president for obvious reasons because he'll do the exact same thing again. Sure. And all the while, again, you have a president on a Monday afternoon when you're working and I'm working and everybody watching us right now is working. He's sleeping on a beach in Delaware, and you have a vice president who is so disingenuous, who can't answer a question, who can't go a minute without either lying or contradicting herself. We're no longer respected around the world. And that breaks my heart to say. We're losing our dollar, we're losing our economy, we're losing common sense, we're losing a lot of respect. And we got to get it back, and we got to get it back very, very quickly. Our country is in a death spiral right now, and I really believe that. And it's so easy to fix. And to everybody watching us, help is on the way. Help is on the way. We're going to restore American greatness. We're going to make sure we stay the superpower of the world. We're going to fix the nonsense, and we're going to restore common sense to this country because it's terrible to watch what's happening.
Well, Eric, I know you have other interviews to do, so I'll let you out on that. And I will say on the air that your father had said it would be a great interview, and he thinks the world of you. Did I hear also from our good, again, mutual friend Elmo that you get a phone call every morning from him? Yeah, that's pretty neat.
I get a lot of early morning phone calls. I get a lot of super late night phone calls. And sometimes he tries to trip me up. Honey, are you awake? I'm like, I'm speaking to you, so obviously I'm awake. Okay, I just wanted to make sure you weren't sleeping, and then I'll get it at like 5 o'clock the next morning. Honey, are you awake? I'm like, this is getting a little old, Dad. But he's Chuck, he's working so hard. The guy's incredible. I mean, it would have been so much easier for him just to pack it in, live in Mar-a-Lago, have the greatest time, spend time with his grandkids, my kids who adore him, go out, live an incredible life, right? Instead, he's out there working, 20 hours a day. He just never stops. The guy his energy is contagious. He's a phenomenal person. He cares about this country so much. And he's one guy that I think in modern politics, where he gets nothing out of this. Absolutely nothing. I mean, Obama gets the nicest house in Martha's Vineyard, right? From community organizers. My father's only gone the opposite way.
The Clintons are billionaires.
Oh, yeah, of course.
They've done pretty well with their public service.
Of course they are. My father just wants to save this country. He just wants to save this nation, and we're going to do it, and we're going to do it again. We're going to make America great again.
Eric, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much.
And Godspeed for the election.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Again, Eric Trump, and we are going to. The rest of the show will be with Republican Congressman Dan Muser, who is out stumping for President Trump all over the country and all over Pennsylvania. So he'll be our follow-up guest. We'll be right back after this message. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Volpe Report podcast. Be sure to visit our YouTube and Facebook pages for upcoming episodes. You can catch up on the Volpe Report podcast on your favorite podcast provider.